Well, hello there, I'm Stippling, and we're looking at set number 75120, K-2SO, a Star Wars Rogue One character, released in the fall 2016 wave of buildable figures. He looks like a fairly complex build, so let's go ahead and see what parts are locked away inside this box. Don't need this. The instructions for K-2SO run all the way up to page 44 and include an inventory of parts, a collection of all the 3 sets that came out this fall, a small mini poster, and that's it. That's a lot of black pieces. As always, we'll start off by taking a look at some of the new, interesting, and recolored parts that are in this box. There are actually 12 of these in black, and for someone who's in desperate need of more of these, this is a really compelling reason to buy another box of K-2SO. I believe this is a recolor, but we get 2 of these cylindrical Technic elements in black. The axle color war continues. For whatever reason, they decided in a mostly, I'd say 95% black figure to go against what they normally do and provide black length 2 axles. There are a total of 19 of those in this set. These aren't all that interesting, I just wanted to point out that there's a couple system pieces included as well. Okay, we got the boring stuff out of the way, time to look at some of the fun stuff. If you watch my review of Sergeant K-2SO, you're familiar with this new mold for the fall 2016. It is an extra large armor shell. It's not designated a number of any kind, but it is larger and more round than the previous armor shells we've experienced. It also does have a connection point for a armor attachment, which, just like K-2SO, is not utilized in this set. Recolor alert, we have 4 halves of the lightsaber hilt, this time in pure black. Oh, Bionicle, how I miss you already. This is a Bionicle element and will always be so to me, but it's nice to see it in a Star Wars figure. This is a recolor. It's appearing in black this time. Previously we've had it in white, gold, and silver. These shoulder guards aren't a new mold. In fact, they're not even in a new color, but as you can tell, they are printed. They have 2 matching Imperial logos on them. They have some obvious wear and damage. That's very intentional. This must be an older droid. The hue of white on each of the printing is a little different. It may be just the challenge of printing white on black. You may see some variance between your printing there. We get some what looks like to be fairly inconsequential stickers, so if you don't want to put them on, all the power to you. So that just leaves K-2SO's head, and what a marvel this head is. It's kind of a matte finish on it, and they seamlessly blend printing on it. If you look really closely, you can even see some circuitry printed on there. There's a red panel with some white dots on it. Really appreciate that color scheme. And they even managed to print some white in the eyes. You can see a lot of gearing and circuitry on the lower portion there. They even have this little vent simulating a mouth. And that contrasts beautifully to the rounded off smooth finish of the top of the head. So that's it for the parts. If I were a betting man, I would say that this build is going to be pretty complicated. So let's waste no more time and go ahead and get started with that. These custom limbs we just built are actually a little bit bigger than the largest limb we currently have. These custom limbs ate up all our black axles. Look, there's 5 of them in each. Okay, that makes a bit more sense. So they have you build this crazy complicated limb piece, and then the very next step is, oh yeah, just use any old other limb piece to connect the rest of it. Yeah, no, whatever, that's fine. Na, 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 na. Hey, haven't I seen you around here before? It's like building a tower, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Oh. One, two, three, four. I can count. This is the most complicated Toa I've ever built. Focus, you vile fiend. Haha! This feels like one of my mocks that I build where when people ask for instructions, I'm like, man, those instructions would be complicated. Drum roll, please. Ta-da! Oh no, that's supposed to go that way. Ah, there we go. Oh!
Round 2. Fight!
I rate 8 out of 8. This is an interesting turn of events. Initiating Imperial Completion Protocol 47.
In the white corner of the ring, measuring in at 29 centimeters tall, hailing from the security sector of the Imperial Army, we have the powerful, the reprogrammed, the lanky K-2SO!
Nothing about K-2SO's construction is traditional. 50% of his limbs are custom, his entire torso is custom, even his action feature is built up from basic Technic underpinnings. I found the build process to be a bit tedious at times, as it consisted primarily of subassembly after subassembly without clear direction of where it was headed. While I initially scoffed at the sea of black parts and the challenge of sifting through them to figure out exactly what I needed, by the end I understood that the consistency of the color scheme is what makes this figure work. With all of the handcrafted body parts, the cohesion in this set lies in the color's uniformity, without which this set would appear more like what it is, a jumble of parts. The greater whole can only be achieved when the individual parts are concealed, and the finished product is really a testament to the skill of the designer. That's not to say that K-2SO is perfect by any means, but you cannot help but be impressed by the technical prowess of its creator. We'll kick things off by, well, I guess punch things off would be more appropriate, by looking at his action feature. If you're at all familiar with the rebooted Lego Bionicle, you may have heard of Skullbasher. Skullbasher had an action feature where he could chop with his right or left hand, or crush with both arms at the same time. That action feature has been displaced and repurposed in this set, and there's nothing wrong with that. So how this works is pretty simple, but it's impressive. By using a frictionless length 3 pin, they've created this sort of mechanism that allows for the arms to rotate based on the positioning of this back section. So by turning this back and forth, it allows K-2SO to punch his enemies at a rapid pace. I'll do that a little slower so you can see it. That alone is pretty cool, but that's not the end of the story. If you look carefully inside K-2SO's back construction, you may also see a little spring-like mechanism inside there. That spring is also connected to this function, and if you push the button, it will apply pressure to the spring, and it's not really a spring, it's more like a tube, but it'll apply pressure to that tube and force both arms to go forward rather than just one. This function can be finicky at times depending on where you have the arms positioned. It's pretty interesting that this droid uses no weapons at all. That's something you don't see very often in Star Wars. Moving on to the appearance of the figure, let's take a look at his head. It's connected semi-forward, so he's got a front-facing neck. And this looks decent from the front, but not so good this way. I don't feel like that's the actual way K-2SO's head is positioned based on the concept art and trailers I've seen. It doesn't seem to be kind of hunchbacked like it is here. I could be wrong though in that. Anyone would tell you that K-2SO right now is looking forward, but this is also him looking up. This is as far up as he can look. And that's due both to the design of the set and, in particular, these Technic panels are holding his head back from rotating. His side-to-side arc is pretty limited as well, but I think it works in most posing situations. He definitely can look down, and he can look very far down. And that's good because he's a very tall figure, so most of the time he'll be looking down on who he's looking at, not up. Now, if you want to get crazy, he's got some crazy posability as well. He can turn his head all sorts of funky ways. As mentioned previously, K-2SO's torso is completely constructed through Technic elements and ball joints, and it achieves a great design. The shaping looks very much like the character we've seen in the trailers, and it still looks fairly humanoid despite being constructed of so many different parts. I like a lot of the detail work in here, and most of it's just literally there to hold the torso up. It's not greebling, it's quite literally his construction. Let's see if I can take that off. This is the back section of a Star Wars figure's construction, and they use it to cover his back to a pretty good effect. From a top-down view, you can see that they even added some antennae on the top to reiterate the droid nature of this character. An unfortunate downside to using that element to cover his back is there's an exposed ball joint there that's kind of hard to miss. The chest is sealed off pretty well using one of these flat tile pieces with a sticker on it to cover up the midsection. They also added a little bit of extra detail here in the form of a blue and white light. As suspected, these additions are inconsequential and you do not need to add them in any way. My main complaint about its construction are the two open Technic holes here and here, and there's no real hiding that. Most angles show it when you're looking at them directly. K-2SO's arms may be one of the hardest things to look past when someone who's unfamiliar with the character is looking to purchase this set. They're weird. His wrist is so far away from his elbow that the posability is strange and awkward. Not to mention the drastic size and thickness difference between the lower arm and the upper arm. What that does is it creates a really, really great contrast between the size of the upper arm and the lower arm, and it's something that's kind of hard to look past. But if you take a look at the character himself, this is not far from accurate. The character does have really thin arms, and he does have an elbow that's way tighter to his chest than his wrist is. While I think the lower arm's construction looks great in isolation, when paired with the upper arm it looks kind of strange. There's not that great of a transition between them. I guess you could say this is the transition, but then it kind of pinches here back to the same size, and then it just grows exponentially from there. They do an amazing job of recreating the shaping of K-2SO's waist section. Those cylindrical pieces are at a perfect angle, and I'm actually quite surprised at how stable they are. There's really just one triangular axle holding the whole thing together, and it really doesn't have a high risk of falling apart without really tugging on the legs, so that's a really good thing. The only negative I want to point out is the blue axle pin. It's really hard to look past. The placing of it's also inconvenient. K-2SO's lower legs take advantage of the new armor piece they molded for 2016. Just like with K-2SO, I feel like this piece again fails to do what it hoped to do, which is to allow for greater coverage on longer-limbed characters. I think it's especially bad on this character because it's using the longest bone piece there is. It quite literally misses the mark, leaving an exposed pinhole just out in the open to be seen. It's really from those exposed pinholes that things start to kind of fall apart on this figure. While the general shaping of the lower legs is accurate to K-2SO's appearance, I just feel like they dropped the ball on this. I don't know what I would have done or what I could have done otherwise, but it just doesn't look right to me. It was the thing that really stuck out to me, even in the promotional box art, which is supposed to be the very best angle of the action figure. The legs still stuck out to me as out of place and weird, and almost backwards to me. Even though that is the shape of his leg does go from a wider position to a more narrow one as it approaches the foot, which clearly is why they used this spine or spike piece. It just doesn't work to me, and it gets worse as you turn the character. You can see the really, really exposed area there where it's not even touching the custom limb they built. It is good that they filled in this gap here. I thought that was an unnecessary step that they opted to do, and the fact that they did it was nice, especially because it only really changes the way the back looks. That's testament to a paradigm shift in Lego's philosophy. They really want these things to look good from all angles, or at least from the front and the back. Under normal circumstances, I would dock some mental points for how thin the the ankle gets here before it gets to the foot. But in this case, I think it works. I think it looks mechanical, and I think it looks like the character itself. What I will dock points for is the rest of it. This friction adder makes everything look, it goes from a rounded, smooth, like almost hourglass shape, or inverted hourglass shape, to just like a square block. And that tends to be my problem with this friction extender and the way Lego uses it. It just does not look right, and really could have used a recolor in black here. Because so much of this figure is custom built, I've already kind of shown you multiple angles of this, so I'm not going to get too deep into what I think about the back. I'm just going to reiterate the fact that they're doing a good job of coverage on the backs. Ordinarily, when I do size comparisons, I focus on a character that's similar to the character we're looking at. In this case, however, I felt as though it was important to measure the comparison between Jin and K-2SO, as they are on camera together what appears to be quite a bit. So I'm really happy that he is taller. I don't really care that he's not exactly to scale taller than her. If these two characters had been the exact same height, I would have felt cheapened by the whole experience. You want these two characters to stand together on your shelf, and you want to see that height difference, as you'll see on the screen when you watch the movie. So if you couldn't tell by now in my review of K-2SO, I'm kind of on the fence. I say a lot of good things about him, I say a lot of bad things about him. I don't really know where I stand. I think the Lego designers did a decent job of recreating the character, who, in all intents and purposes, is a weird character. He is a disproportionate, lanky, goofy character. He looks strange. So if you can look past that and focus, I guess, only on how he relates to that character, I think he looks a lot better than if you didn't know that character existed and thought that this Lego representation of him was it. You may have had a lot more questions and been a lot more uncomfortable with the design choices, but you can kind of at least see what the designer was trying to do, and I think for the most part it panned out well. Everything from the waist up looks good to fantastic. Everything lower than the waist, I have a lot of problems with. As I stated before, the upper leg, the armor shell just does not cover enough to qualify that piece to be used. It's better than anything we've had previously, but it still doesn't hit the mark. The lower leg uses, I'm estimating here, maybe about 10 or 15 parts to achieve the look, and it just fails on so many levels to capture a cohesive shape, and that side view is just hard to get out of your mind. Lastly, the blockiness of the feet is just messes everything up. So I guess that is the bottom line to how I feel about this set. It's a good set, but the problems with the set are really hard to accept and move past. So now I'm gonna turn the review on to you guys. What do you think about this set? In particular, what do you think about the proportions? Do you think the Lego designers went too far in trying to replicate the proportions of the figure, or do you think they did a good job of capturing that in Lego form? How do you feel about this character being built mostly custom? Do you think that was a wise choice, or do you think those parts could have been better utilized, creating more detail in the figure? As always, I very much appreciate your support, and I thank you for watching.